Welcome, everybody, back to It All Counts, the podcast. I have a very special guest today, a guy that I truly admire, I respect a great deal, one of the best college coaches in all of college basketball, Johnny Dawkins.
Hey, Cuonzo, how are you?
I'm excited, man, and thank you for being here. Excited to watch you guys play. Again, Johnny, I know you as a humble man, and I want to talk about a few of your accolades, things you've done very well. Second all-time leading scorer at Duke University. And they didn't have a three-point shot. Two-time first-team All-American, four-time All-ACC, 10th pick in the draft, San Antonio Spurs, right?
Yes.
A lot of great 9 years in the NBA, man, just phenomenal things. And the thing I like about you most, if you don't research these things, you wouldn't know it about Johnny Dawkins because you had such a humble approach, an exceptional man. How did that come about?
I think it was how I was raised. My parents, I think they instilled that in us, at an early age. It's not about us. It's about putting in the work, and letting the work speak for itself. And I kind of followed that throughout my career.
Great. Going to Duke University, and I got to ask this question, Johnny, because I grew up a Georgetown fan. Everybody watched Georgetown. As talented as you were as a player coming out of the D.C. area, why Duke over Maryland, Georgetown, those schools?
I get that question a lot, Cuonzo, and for me, people wouldn't realize I grew up a fan of those places too, because I grew up there, and that's home for me, and I love it. But I just felt, the job that Coach K and the staff had done was exceptional. They made me feel I was a priority. They had an unbelievable vision for me there, and not that other places didn't have, great things to share with me and wanted me to be in their, places as well. I just felt right about it. And not only that, but I leaned on my family too, and especially my father. And as we were going through the process, he was instrumental in kind of helping me understand, what I was looking for, what he thought would be the best fit for me. And so I give him a lot of credit for, helping me in making that decision.
Coming out of high school, as talented as you were, did you think you could be a 10-year pro?
Coming out, no. Back then, Cuonzo, as you remember, man, you looking at the guys that were in the NBA, you only had around 22 teams.
Yeah.
Rosters were size 12. And so I wanted to be a pro. That was my goal. That was my dream since I could remember. But, I didn't have any illusions thinking that at 6'1", 152 pounds going to college, I'm going to be an NBA player. I'm thinking I'm going to have to, figure it out and hopefully I can get better and want to get a college degree. And if I'm fortunate enough to go on beyond that and play, then that would be just great.
Phenomenal. Playing for Coach K, obviously one of the best that ever do it. One or two best that ever do it, in my opinion. Playing for him, what were some of the lessons learned in going into that situation?
Playing for him was great. Like I said, he had a great vision for me from the start. It was really a championship vision. And so, we throw those words around, but he meant it. And he thought we could get that done with our group. We practiced that way every day. Our standards were so high.
Yes.
I can't remember going to a practice where our standards, in preparation for a game wasn't the highest. So I think the first thing I think about when his name come to mind is just preparation. We was always so prepared for our opponent. I used to make a joke. I already knew what time they were going to the restroom, because we were that, well-versed on what they were going to do, what they were going to run, what each player was going to do out there on the floor. I think that was one of the things. And for me, talked about and always be authentic to who you are.
Yes.
Don't try to be him. He didn't try to be someone else, and he don't expect us to try to be who he is. And I took that to heart. I look at coaches now and, right now, because Deion Sanders is an amazing coach. He's doing some incredible things. But he's also just being Deion.
Yes.
I followed Deion when he was a player and in studio after that. And he's always been who he is.
Yes.
And so he's authentic to him. And as your athletes, as a coach, they can sniff out if you're not really who you are. You're trying to be someone else. So that was a great piece of advice for me. I've always tried to be authentic. This is who I am. And I think our players, they feed off of that.
Now, in that same transition, after finishing your NBA career, what brought you into college, and also you were back on the Duke staff, how did that come about?
You wouldn't believe it. I wasn't thinking about coaching. My mind after my pro days and all the traveling things that we do in the NBA and in collegiately, I was thinking more or less, I want a job that gives me permanency in one city. I like to stay in one place. I'd been gone all my life, it felt like. And so I was actually working toward that. I was in a management program at Duke University, studying to be an athletic director. So that was my goal. I wanted to be an athletic director, working, administration, still work with student athletes, but not have the grind of what we have to do with the travel and so forth. But it just so happened, I mean, life is funny. You 6 months into the program, Tommy Amaker, Coach Amaker, he takes his first head coaching job at Seton Hall. And that opens up a spot on the Duke bench. And Coach, walks over to where I was working and go, "Hey, you ever think about coaching?" And as you know, as I know, when someone's coached you, it's like, I think he's asking, he's kind of telling you, yeah, you're coaching now.
Yes, exactly.
So I went on and did it. And, and I thank him to this day for that. I thank him almost every time I see him or speak with him. I always say at some point, "Coach, I really want to thank you, because it really was my calling from the standpoint. I didn't see it, but I've loved every minute of it, working with these young men, on a daily basis, helping them, find their way, helping them, go from young men to becoming men. All the things that I stand for, I'm able to try to instill in these young people I get a chance to work with. And I'm always just so thankful for that opportunity that he gave me."
Well, a question, and I'll kind of give a backdrop first. I had the same experience in working for Coach Katie, my college coach, and he called me about an opportunity. And Coach was phenomenal, and I consider him a father figure type man to me. He looked at me as a player, but also as his son in coaching. But he always treated me with a level of respect. But it was almost as if my son is coaching on my staff. How did Coach treat you in that situation? Or how did you feel?
From day one, he gave me complete ownership of what's going on out there. And I think that shows a certain level of respect. And like you said, a father-son type of relationship. He allowed me to do, what I want to do. Like, I hear all kinds of stories in our profession. When you're on someone's staff, you can't say this or you can't do that. The great thing about Coach, he allowed me to do everything. And by allowing me to touch every part of the program, it allowed me to grow. There was nothing when I took my first head coaching job that I wasn't prepared for. There was not one speaking engagement or donor relations event or, preparing my team for whatever we were going to do. I had already done that times 10 working there, because he allowed me from day one to do that. And I think he gave me a book one time, and it was like, "Think like an owner," which means he wanted me to take ownership of the team, not just be an employee of the team.
Impressive.
And I've always admired him for giving me an opportunity to be able to find myself in that kind of environment.
That's impressive. With all those guys that came through Duke, all those pros, a lot of talented players, guys that came up short pros, 10-year pros, what was your method as an assistant coach in helping those guys develop into becoming pros, and how did you handle the parents in those situations?
Wow, that's a great question. I mean, first, trying to help the young student athletes, for me, it's about helping them get better. And not just get better on the court, it's on and off the court. And as you know, the thing you can do is you can talk to a player all you want, but they're watching your every action. So how you live your life, how you interact with them, they're watching. And so you're going to tell them who you are at some point in time during their career. And so first of all, I want to lead by example by always showing them what type of man I am, what my beliefs are. And then from there, I go into what I'm trying to teach. I'm always trying to help them get better. I always had a saying, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. So we always striving to push them forward in the sport, but also in the classroom. I'm a big believer in, you're not there just to get by. You're there to excel. And if you're there to get by, then I'm going to be hard on you. If I know you're working hard, you're trying to excel, then you'll never hear me say anything to you about that. But if I find out that you're not at anything you're doing, whether it's on the court or off the court, we're not going to be a bunch of guys that are just trying to get by in life. We're trying to thrive. We're trying to excel. And so I'm always looking for those signs, and I have enough people and staff that can help me find that out. And if you're doing that, then I'm going to try to find ways to push buttons to get you past that.
Impressive. Now, speaking of that, you had the pleasure of coaching your own son, Aubrey, a talented player. And I had a chance to coach against him. Now, that wasn't fun, but it is what it is. How was that environment? Because my son went to another school. I would have enjoyed coaching. We went somewhere else in a great situation at Purdue University. But how was that experience?
You know what? It was unbelievable. And similar to, I'm not sure if yours was kind of like mine. Initially, I didn't want to coach him. Okay. I felt I had already worked with him since day one on his skill, on his game. And when I'm in his ear that much, after every day at school for him, he would come over no matter where I was coaching, and I would grab him and we would go to the gym that night. And I didn't care what time it was, we would go in the gym and we were going to put work in. But as you know, what comes with that is you're in someone's ear all the time since he's 7, 8 years old until he's 18. You know that voice can become numb to it a little bit. So I was a little bit concerned that would this be overkill if I ended up coaching him on top of that. So when he first went away to go play, I was happy for him and I was fine with it. And as things went on and I transitioned from Stanford to UCF, I think the opportunity presented itself, and it was more my wife and my daughter saying, you need to have him with you. You need to have him with you. And I was like, you know what? We've had a couple years of separation now, and you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe it's time. And so we had a conversation, and I think he was ready to make a transition, and I say, I think this would be a great fit for you. I looked at our roster and who we had, thought it'd be a great fit. And when he came in, I just said, I just need you to do 2 things for me. And you do these 2 things, it's going to be important for us to coexist. I said, 1, don't call me dad, in the gym or in the locker room. I'm your coach. And I said, and 2, don't ever fight my battles for me, in the locker room or on the court. I said, because as you know, when you are a coach, and players get to that locker room after a tough practice or whatever it may be, or I didn't play as much as I thought I should have played, they're going to vent and they're going to share things that's kind of meaningless from the standpoint. But if your son is hearing those things, it becomes, a little more problematic because they're going to want to defend, your honor in there. And I said, no, I don't need you to do that for me. I said, I can fight my battles. You just go ahead and, be the best version of yourself, but call me coach. And never fight my battles in the locker room. I can handle all of those things. And so, he adhered to that philosophy. He was a great teammate. I don't think you'll find one player they ever played with that didn't love playing with him because they knew he was one of them. Because, they knew he was understanding the value of being a great teammate and that, sharing things that didn't need to be shared with a coach.
So on his tough days, because, of course, his mom is your wife, but on his tough days, how did you handle that as a father and as a coach? How did you deal with that?
I probably at times on his tough days could have been better, looking back on it. But it's part of growing up. You look back and, it's tough days. Definitely when he's your son, he's going to, catch it a little more than maybe the other players. Using him a lot of times for the example of what's going on out there, expecting a certain thing from him. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think his standard, as high as our standards are, his standards were higher, coming from me. And I think it was good for our players to see that because they felt more comfortable that, hey, he's coaching his son this hard, then he can coach us hard as well. And so I think it really lent itself to helping our overall team. It probably made for, to be quite frank, some tough evenings at home some nights where he may go back and say, Mom, I can't believe Dad said this or that. And so we laugh about it now, but back then, I'm sure it probably was tough for him. But I think it helped him grow. As you know, that's the only way you're going to grow anyway, is through some tough times, through some adversity. And so I look at those as just learning experiences for him, and whatever he faces after he left me would be that much easier.
Man, I like that. You're a college graduate from Duke University, a great university. What premium do you put on in recruiting to young men and their families the value of getting a degree? Because as we see nowadays, everything is predicated on I need to be a pro, I need to work on my game. I don't hear as much the value around the country on the educational piece. How do you feel about that?
Just like you feel about it, I think that you need that a college degree, has a premium. I think it does have value, and we need to understand that. And I'm a big proponent. If a player plays for me 1 year and he's one and done, we have a player this year, Taylor Hendricks, is one and done player. But believe me, I'm still going to encourage Taylor to come back and get his degree. Mm. And I've done that with every single player I've ever been a part of as an assistant or a head coach, is encourage those young men to come back and get their degree. And I don't care how long it takes, but they're going to want that because your child may not be the talent that you were. He may not be able to go professionally and go somewhere early like that. And so for you to go back to him and say, hey, you need to get your degree, and Dad, you didn't get your degree, I think that becomes a hard sell. Do as I say, but not as I do. So I'm very big on those guys, going back and getting their college education and a degree. And as you know, you're going to need it. I mean, regardless of what you're taking in class, it may be a subject you don't think you're going to ever use in the real world, bottom line is it's still teaching you how to think. It's teaching you how to approach certain situations. You're learning that even if you don't realize it. And so it's going to help you transition into the next part of your life much easier than if you didn't have one. So that's kind of my speech that I give those players. And like I said, I'll have that talk with my former player now because of that.
John, this is a question. In the college landscape around the country, you're known as a leader with vision and high character. So in saying that, you're also a very humble man with all your success. And I've tell people all the time, if you don't know all Johnny's accolades, then you have to research it because you're not a guy that talks a lot about this. So going into somebody's home and recruiting them, how do you sell all those accolades, all the guys that you've coached as pros, as an assistant, as a head coach, and all your success as a basketball player? How do you sell that?
Well, one, I never really talk about me as much. My staff will. They'll
great.
elaborate on things that you just mentioned right there, and they'll emphasize certain things that I've accomplished. But for me, very rarely will I have anything to share about that. I mostly talk about my staff. And talk about the people around me, and how good they are and what they can do to help us develop. But as far as my personal experiences, very rarely will I share that with players. Like I said, they learn it. I was fortunate to have a really good career. And my job is trying to help them, make that, same opportunity, come true for them as it did for us. And that's just a matter of how hard we're working. And it won't happen for every player, but I want them to know I'm committed to trying to get them as good as they can become so they can max out their career as well.
I like that. Yeah, let me get some claps in there first. Recently inducted to the Hall of Fame. I mean, a phenomenal feat, tremendous honor. It's got to feel good, Johnny. Come on, it's got to feel good.
It really did. It felt good because it was such a special evening too. To share it with my college coach, a number of my teammates. Tommy Amaker was in the audience there, and so it was really fun to see guys like that. Jay Billis was there. Weldon Williams, guys that I played with that could make it. Was there. So as much of an honor as it was. As you know, no one gets there by themselves.
Oh, you're right.
And I say that all the time. I was fortunate. I had great teammates. And so to be able to share that with them, to be able to spend that time with Coach on that same day, to be honored that way, something I'll never forget. It was a great evening. And like I said, you want to always, leave your legacy. We always say that at UCF, leave your legacy. Leave the place better than the way you found it. And I'm glad to be recognized as I left college basketball better than how I found it. I played a part in helping making it better. And that's all you can ever want to do, with your college career. And so very, very excited and grateful for that honor, to be quite frank.
Right. Did you have any heroes growing up?
Heroes growing up. I mean, probably the two people that I would think would be heroes for me growing up. Of course, my Uncle Davey was a great basketball player. He was ahead of me. And, he made me better every day because he pushed me. He was better. He was faster, more athletic, shot it better, just better. And so I'm looking at him going, am I ever going to be good? Watching him and taking them beat downs. And but, kept coming back, kept getting better because of that. He never let me off the hook, and it made me a better player. Of course, my father, the same thing. He pushed me. He was a military guy, Green Beret. So, he pushed me, every single day, talked to me and showed me what work ethic looked like, how he went out to work every day. He drove, the public bus in Washington, D.C. So I saw him every day going out working, saw how hard he worked. I saw how hard, when we worked out and played against each other, I saw how hard he competed against me. My father was only 20 years older than me, so he had me when he was young. So up to when he was 40, I was 20. We still playing ball against each other. So, I took a lot of beatings, and but, it made me better. And so those were guys that you think of that I would, say my heroes. And then last but not least by any means, Jesus Christ, to be quite frank, and let me go right to the top, And so ultimately, our Lord and Savior, I look back and I lean on that all the time because I know I wouldn't be where I was without that. I wasn't some dude 6'10" with a 40-inch vertical. I was 6'1", as I said, 152 pounds, soaking wet. And I know it could have went a lot of different ways for me. And it went that way because of my overall belief and in dreaming and put my faith in him and, look back and I'm like, wow, made things happen that I didn't even believe could happen for me like that.
That's impressive. Wow, very impressive. ACC, a phenomenal league still to this day, but I want to bring up two names in your era. Michael Jordan and Len Bias. What about those two guys?
Man, when you say those two names, and I was during the same time as you mentioned as both of those players, you're talking about two amazing players. Of course, starting with Lenny, who grew up in the same area that we grew up in the DMV. I mean, unbelievable talent, had a great work ethic. You saw him getting better every year, both physically as well as his overall skill development. I mean, he was, I think he was going to be one of the greatest NBA players to play our game. We'll never know because it was a tragedy what happened to him, but great player. And of course, Mike, same thing. I played against Mike all the way through college. First time I played against Mike, I was in high school playing at a National Sports Festival. I'll never forget it. And I'm watching this player, about 6'4" at the time, and I'm like, man, he's a really good player. I mean, he goes hard. I mean, he just plays so hard. Every possession he's trying to make something happen. And so I knew he was going to be good. So then I'm watching the NCAA tournament, and I'm watching them play Georgetown. He hits the shot to win the game. I'm like, I knew the young man was going to be good. And then he hit the shot to win the game. So then I get, I'm at Duke the next year, and I end up going to go to his room to play some pickup ball. We picking him up from his room, one of his teammates from Carolina. And we open the door, and then he's standing at the door. He's 6'6". I'm like, when I played him when I was in the sports bar, he was 6'4". And I'm like, Dad, he was really good at 6'4". So I'm like, what the heck is he going to be at 6'6"? And so with the rest of his history, we know what he's going to be at 6'6" now. And but a phenomenal player, and not only that, but a phenomenal competitor. The thing I liked about both of those guys, man, and you know how it is for us. Whether it's pickup ball and there's nobody in the gym, or whether it's 20,000 people, you could not tell the difference in playing either one of those guys. The level of play when they were on the court, the level of competitiveness, it was just beautiful to see. And as a competitor, you like that because that's what you want.
Yes.
I want you at your best. I don't want you half going through the motions. I need you at your best because that's where I can see where I am. And neither one of those guys would ever disappoint you. And whether it's a pickup game or a real game, they were going to give you their best.
Music to my ears. What's the hardest part about leadership?
Hardest part about leadership, that's another great question. I mean, it's lonely. It's lonely. I mean, the first thing I think of when you say that is just being alone. I mean, it's not something where I don't think anyone that's not in that seat can fully understand because, and I didn't either when I was assistant coach for coach at 10 years, you're making suggestions and it rolls off your tongue so easy. It rolls off easy. This, and we can do that. We should try this. Then this would be great to do. And then you realize, man, that when you sit in that seat, every one of those decisions, everyone's looking at how it turns out and they're looking at you to see how it turned out. And then the other part about leadership is not wanting to disappoint the people that you have that's working with you. My staff, all the student athletes I coach, as trainer, strength and conditioning coach. I mean, all these people that are with you are depending on, your success and what you do out there. And so that sense of responsibility that goes along with it, that weight of responsibility, not just for yourself, but for your entire staff. So I would think being lonely, it's a lonely position, as well as just the overall weight of responsibility that you have for, if you care about it, the people that you love that's on your staff, that's meaningful to me.
You hit it on the knob. If you care about it, man, you brought back a lot of memories. 20 plus years in this thing as a coach, assistant coach, and head coach. How do you find the balance, if there is a balance of husband, fatherhood? How do you find the balance and coaching?
I was very fortunate. I listened to a lot of coaches' stories. And again, I'm going to mention Coach K in this because, when I was a young coach, my kids were young. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if you remember, but you didn't see me out on the road as much.
No, I didn't.
Because I was taking care of my family. He allowed me in the profession to take care of my family and to watch them grow and to help them grow before I kind of was allowed to now let's get out there more and do more because your kids are of age where they're in high school and they're moving a little bit more. Mm-hmm. But initially I wasn't on the road as much and I'm very thankful for that. And I didn't fully even understand it all the time when I was a young coach. I don't think I did because I'm looking at the business. But I started to understand it as my kids were starting to, mature and go through things. And I was happy I was able to be around them to help kind of, help them manage certain things that they were going through as young people. So that was my first, thing that helped me. And then after that, for me, it becomes a situation where I'm a head coach for like the last 15, 16 years. In that regard, I try to keep that in perspective. Like I always try to do things like, in the off season, I'm always going to try to spend, have a vacation with my wife. I'm always going to try to have a vacation with my family, with my children. I'm always going to try to do something with them. And because ultimately we spend so much time helping other young people and their families that it's only right that we take care of our own family. And so I make sure they understand that they're not forgotten in this process and that they're a part of what we do. So when you hire Johnny Dawkins, you're not just hiring Johnny Dawkins, you're hiring his family. And so my family becomes part of our team's family. And so we all are having that shared experience, and they understand that, and fortunately, I think they've really enjoyed it as well.
With building programs, and you've had great success in your stops in building programs, we both know it's exhausting in doing that. You've had great success at UCF, things that they've never done at the university. What goes into building a program?
Well, I think right away, you have to really do your homework. You have to understand, okay, what am I working with? What do we need to be successful here? And, from staff to trainers to strength coaches to personnel, you have to make sure that you have the right pieces that fit your style and your system. And then from there, you start to build. And then I think you have to have some values, some things that, what are your core values? What do you stand for? And that has to be first and foremost, and that's to be up there every day for our players to see. So for me, we're going to start off with a few things that aren't basketball specific, but are very important for me. We're going to start off with God first. I always tell our players and our recruits, if you don't believe in something bigger than you, then I know there's probably going to be a problem. You have to have a belief in something bigger than you. 2, family. Your family and our families are number one. This is how we look at things. We are, that is huge for us. How you treat your family with your personal family, and our interaction with our teammates, which is your family, is very important for our success. 3, are you going to have an ability to embrace academics? Are you going to embrace academics? And I mean, like I said before, not just come here and want to just get by. Are you going to want to try to excel? Are you going to try to max out your academic experience? 4, basketball. Basketball. This is what you love since probably you picked up a ball. And I want you to continue to love that. And just because it's 4th don't mean it's least. As you know, for us to make it, it can't be least. Just because it's 4th don't mean it's least. And then finally for us, social. In other words, you got to have a well-rounded experience. And when I was in college, the last 3 of the things that you probably see the most for a college student, 18 to 22, academics, athletics, and social, you got to balance those. Yes. You got to understand, you need all 3, but social need to be last. And you need to make sure with your academics and athletics that you stand on top of those things and not just trying to get by in them, but trying to maximize your career in both of those areas. So we start there, Zoe, but after that we build our core values that we do basketball-wise. But that's what we have as our foundation. In some kind of way, we're teaching that every day. Our players may not see it or know it, but some kind of way, whether one of my assistants or someone from my staff is interacting with them, while I'm interacting with them, but some kind of way we're showing them those things on a daily basis.
Well, those are valuable lessons on leadership in itself. I mean, those will last a lifetime, and I think that's a lot of value as a leader, giving those guys those insights. Now, I've coached against you. I've been to your practices. You're meticulous on all those details. You don't allow things to slip. But what I find impressive about that, it's not like you yelling and attacking guys. You make sure guys are accountable for doing those things. You hold your guards accountable as leaders. And I found it to be very impressive because you're able to do that without raising your voice. Some guys are very boisterous. Nothing wrong with that, but you're able to get your point across very well.
Again, it's exactly what we said earlier about you got to be authentic to who you are. Yes. That's just my personality. I'm not trying to be a coach that's is boisterous. I mean, that's them, and I'm fine with that. But being true to me, I have to coach in a certain way. I'm a big believer in teaching and trying to teach these guys what we want. And then, we're going to hold them accountable. And I think by holding them accountable, they understand what that means. And so therefore, I think we have their attention with that alone. And so I can pick my spots when I have to, of course, raise my voice or raise the temperature. But by and large, I'm trying to teach, I'm trying to coach, I'm trying to move them in that direction by helping them, get better at whatever skill set or whatever we're trying to teach that day.
I like that. Now, this question here, with the new college landscape, name, image, and likeness, which I think is a great thing if it's handled the right way, because I love to see young men get money because, again, I go back to my college roommate, Glenn Robinson. That guy could have had millions of plus dollars. No one picking the draft. You coach guys that you've done it yourself. So I'm happy to see that. How do you feel about that? But it's twofold. Also, how do you help young men handle and manage money? What kind of advice do you have for them?
Well, a few things for that. One, as you said earlier, you have to lean into that. It's here to stay. I mean, once the toothpaste is out the tube, you're not putting it back in. And I'm okay with that like you. Now, I was a student athlete, and I do think these young student athletes should be paid in some respect. Now, how we go about finding out the best way of doing it, I think we can still come up with a model that's better than what we're doing now. But I am fine for the student athletes. I'm happy for them. As you said, we didn't have anything. And that opportunity for those families and for their young student athletes to achieve that, there's nothing wrong with that. And so I would start there. And then for me, in teaching our student athletes how to manage that situation, I always start with a story for our players. And they've heard me say it numerous times. I use the NBA for the example. 60% of all NBA players usually are bankrupt 5 years out. That's a terrible number. 60%, 6 out of 10 are bankrupt 5 years after their NBA career is over. So therefore, it's not what you make, it's what you keep. Yes. And that's the kind of conversation I have with our student athletes. It's not what you're getting, it's what you can keep, and understanding how to do that. And for that to happen, you have to educate yourself and put people around you to have a good understanding of how to do those things as well. And so I'm big on that. We have, educational seminars on campuses and classes our guys are taking, multiple times a year, just financial management, multiple times, because we feel it's that important that these young people and young student athletes learn how to manage what they have. And so that's kind of our approach. And so far it's been good for us. Our guys get it. And so we're about understanding how to save and not, squander what you've received. And our guys have been pretty receptive to that.
My last question, Johnny, hopefully I don't come up with 10 more, but my last question, if there's one thing in this world that you can change, one or two things, what would it be?
Man, I mean, that's easy for me. I mean, I look at this world right now and we can be better than we are. We can be better. I start with just hunger. I mean, the way we are set up in our world right now, no one should ever go hungry. I mean, we're so set up and we know so many ways in agriculture to grow and do things and have shared experiences around the world by moving food from one place to another. No one should ever be hungry. And the other one I would think, everyone should have a place to live. I mean, I look around in our country right now and it pains me to see, the homeless population, the size that it's grown to. And that's not right. I mean, we can be better than that, and we should be better than that, especially here with everything and the resources we have, strongest and greatest nation probably to ever be on this earth. And we can be better in those areas, and our world can be better if we all just understand the importance of it.
There you have it. It all counts, the podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. We've had a tremendous guest in Johnny Dawkins, a great fan. I enjoyed being around him. Phenomenal man. I learned a lot from him. Again, all of our fans, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Johnny Dawkins, UCF. Let's make sure we jump on board. Take care.